It is not often that you meet someone in the online space that truly, truly inspires you. I recently had the opportunity to interview Bill Yates, who lives in Australia and was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease at the age of 59. This interview is a little bit different than the normal format of this particular podcast because I allowed Bill to tell his story without many interruptions so that he would be able to stay on track and express his particular story in his unique voice. I would encourage you, if you are able, to actually watch this interview online on YouTube or watch the video in the post because we use a lot of photos of Bill and his life. It is just a very wonderful, sweet story of how Bill is navigating his own dementia diagnosis with grace and with positivity and with tremendous love of living and life. I hope and I know that you will experience the same admiration and inspiration from Bill's story that I have had in watching him over the last couple of years in the online space. So welcome to Christian Dementia Caregiving, the podcast where we teach people to still have hope and find joy in their lives as caregivers or people living with dementia, because even though it can be difficult at times, it does not need to ruin your life, and it is actually very simple to navigate if you understand what to do and how to do it. So without further ado, here is our next episode with Bill Yates. Well, welcome to today's episode. I am extremely excited on so many different levels to have a very special guest. His name is Bill Yates, and he lives in Australia, which creates a lot of time scheduling issues when you are working through international time zones like that. But Bill has a very unique story, and I've been following him on social media, primarily on LinkedIn, for probably over 2 years now. And he has just really inspired me with his journey as a person who is living with dementia. And I reached out and asked him if he'd be willing to come speak to you guys today about his experiences and what he is doing in his life to live well with a dementia process. So, Bill, thank you so much, very, very much for being here today.
Thank you, Lizette, and hello, everyone. My talk today is probably a little bit different in the sense that I'd like to share with you my journey. I will talk about the diagnosis. In August 2019, I was diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's disease at the age of 59. And I have no problems in saying to anyone, was it tragic? Yes, it was. Was it devastating for me and my family? It was horrendous. It turned my life completely upside down. But that is one side of a narrative which we all hear about dementia. My talk today is probably, I'd like you to show you another side. And that really concerns about how to live well or live a better life following post-diagnosis. And where I want to share you with the different things that I work with, I've created, things that I do, my idea is not to mimic me, is rather to look at your own experiences, look at your own abilities, look what gets you up in the morning. And I refer to that as a passion. What are you passionate about? And out of all that, look at doing things that you enjoy, that make you laugh, that bring you enjoyment. And that's the part that I would like to really emphasize with everyone. Um, is everything I show you, it's been now probably 4.5 years since I adopted a completely different mindset. And please, in some respect, I hope that I inspire you. You see something different, but it's something which has taken a long, long time to get to where I am. So let's see how we go. I think the first thing is that it's probably to understand my diagnosis. Um, like everyone, I showed a whole range of behavior. I showed a whole range of cognitive decline. And that's one side of a diagnosis of dementia. The other side you need is the clinical evidence. So initially, prior to my diagnosis, I had what they call is a perfusion scan. And that basically measures the blood supply to your brain. And in my case, it showed that it was diminished. So it doesn't actually tell you have Alzheimer's. It actually just indicates it's a possibility. So I then went and saw a geriatrician, and she was exactly the same way, thinking, yep, you've got symptoms. I can do the measurements on you. Yep, there's something there. But to be definitive about it, in Australia, this test, which is called an amyloid PET scan, it's not covered by our health system. So it cost me $2,500, and I paid for that. And what it does is it measures the amyloid beta deposits in your brain. And way back in 5 years ago, that was measured on a scale of 0, 1, 2, and 3, 3 being the highest grade. In my case, my grading was 3. So what it actually showed was that in my lateral temporal cortex, which deals with auditory information and encodes in memory, there was a grade 3. And in the parietal cortex, which is involved in receiving and processing the impulses from your sensory system, I was also very high at the highest grade. So what I'm sort of saying is my diagnosis was based on two aspects. One, you have the clinical evidence, what the geriatrician was observing for my behavior, my symptoms, and then together with this hard evidence that clearly the two supported my diagnosis. But I also like to say it wasn't my first experience with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. I'd previously looked after my father for 4 years before he passed away of dementia. So that's what I sort of say from the very beginning. I understand the word devastating. I understand the word tragic from that perspective, because it's exactly how I felt. And I learned that there was no cure. And I suppose that was the hardest thing in my whole life, was that where I wanted to fight this disease, everyone was telling me there's no cure, which I sort of understood. But the worst side of that was that there was no plan. I couldn't access some post-diagnostic care and support program which would show me how to fight this disease. And I have no doubt my geriatrician was great, fantastic. She told me, look, Bill, you can look to increasing your exercise, you can do brain stimulation, you can sleep well, reduce the stress. But being an ex-science teacher, physics and chemistry and things like that, I needed something a lot more structured in my life. That sort of just didn't work for me. And I sort of say there's one part I think a lot of people can relate to, is that at that time, for the next couple of months, for me, there was a period of darkness. And I'd say that was that for me, socially, I retreated. I ate and I drank too much. I put on over 20 kilograms. So for me, it was the first time ever I was over, I think it was 106 kilograms. And basically, I felt sorry for myself. I thought, the world was against me. Life had very little meaning for me. I didn't want to interact. I didn't want to do anything. And it's an interesting state to be in, I think. And I think a lot of people have experienced that, all to different degrees. But in my case, I was probably a very good example of what you shouldn't do. And luckily for me is that my group of friends who are very close, they took me to Japan, and and I went and saw what we refer to as the World Cup in rugby. It was the 2019 World Cup rugby,
Oh,
and
lovely.
this is me. And I have you see, I have the orange shirt on.
Uh-huh.
You can see the guy to my left, maybe to your right, with the blue hat. He's my identical twin brother, which is Lev.
Wow.
So he shows no signs or symptoms. So obviously, there's something that happened in my life which triggered this. I'm fully aware of what that was. Um, but I think it was laughing and carrying on like a 20-year-old. I think for about 10 days. What that meant, I'm not going to go into, but quite simply, I had such a fantastic time. I realized what I was doing, this period, this darkness, I'd allowed it to surround me. So I came back with a completely renewed view on life. I'd gone to this tour thinking that's what you guys say, the last hurrah. I thought, this is it. I'm never going to go overseas. This disease will progress just like my father, and 4 years, that'll be it. So to me, it sort of all made sense. But what it did is it showed me that, hey, you've got to get up. We all face adversity in our lives. We stumble, we fall. No
Mhm.
problem with that. What makes the real difference is what my father used to say, was that when you stand up, it's what you actually do.
Mm.
So what I'm going to share with you now is that first concept, is that I came back, and being in my prior life a pharmacist, and my twin brother was also a pharmacist too. Twins tend to do exactly the same things. We figured out there was two things I had to do. Firstly, I had to enroll in a novel clinical trial. And I'm just going to talk about that now for you now. So Immune Bio is a Californian company. So I have a strong attachment to America in lots of ways. One of the last hurrah, and the story I'm going to tell you now. So I decided, in probably the biggest gamble of my life, that the amyloid beta and the tau hypothesis was something I wasn't going to follow. I figured in the 20, 25 years that they've been experimenting, there's been no breakthrough with these drugs. And sure enough, in more recent times, that's probably not true. But in 6 years ago, that's where it stood. So I decided to follow what they call the neuroinflammation hypothesis. So I actually viewed my Alzheimer's, my dementia, as an inflammatory response within my
Mm.
brain. So the concept behind this drug is to remove the inflammation. And and that attracted me. So I went into it. To this date, I've been on this drug for over 3.5 years. So I get a weekly injection into my stomach, and it has side effects. But at the end of the day, the results are encouraging. So much so, what you're seeing now is that in Australia, we have the Australian Dementia Research Forum. It's probably the peak conference in Australia for all clinicians. And I was invited to speak. And one of the things I like doing at conferences is to walk around and look at all the posters. And by chance, this poster gained my attention. So I walked over, and I bumped into this lovely lady, Dr. Stubbs, who was sent out from America, from California, to talk about the results of this trial, which was conducted in Australia. So I didn't say who I was. I just listened to her. And in my trial, it doesn't receive any credibility because there was 18 of us, and by the time we finished, there were 6 of us. There were no placebos. It was just a trial to work out the efficacy of it. So I listened to her, and then she pointed to the results, And I looked at her and I said, see that cross there, which you're going to see right now? See that cross in number 3? I said, I think that's me. And she looked at me and she didn't quite. What are you talking about? I said, I was on this trial. And that was, it was an interesting story. And I love to hear exactly what she'd said. So you can see that it's called Xpro 1595. At the end of it, there was actually 6 you can see after 3 months. And then at 12, there was only 3 of us left. And 2 of us, the last 2 crosses, what this one does, just to explain this one, it's got an interesting graph, is that as your brain, with dementia, as your brain deteriorates, the brain gets smaller and what they call the free water space actually increases in size. So obviously your brain doesn't push in, or your skull doesn't push in. If the brain gets smaller, then something's got to take its space, which is what they call the free water. So you see that in normal people with Alzheimer's, you can see the top line, it increases like that. And you can see the drug here. All right. So the 2 of us were the bottom crosses. You can see it was quite amazing results in this sense. So from my perspective, that I had to do, people now talk about the gold standard for Alzheimer's treatment, and that being a precision medicine, which is what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that I also saw that we hear a lot of things these days about risk factors that, you can reduce your risk. The other side of that statement is that for people living with dementia, these factors can also slow down the rate, or they're known to slow down the rate at which your decline happens. So in my time as being an advocate for a range of organisations, I was coming across people who had been, they decline, no doubt about that, but after 8 or 10 years, they're still functioning quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I've met other people who, after 2, 3, 4 years, that wouldn't be true. So in the discussions with my twin brother, we looked at it 2 ways. I needed a drug, which is clearly why I went with Xpro 1595. And I also needed to make a whole range of lifestyle changes. And what I'm going to share with you now is those lifestyle changes. But in sharing this, before I do that, I'd also like to say one other thing too, is that everyone associates dementia and Alzheimer's disease with a cognitive decline. And I'm totally on the page with that. I couldn't agree with it 100%. It's just that. It's true. But I found is that what really impacted on me the most was that my concept of self was taken away.
Mm.
Prior to a diagnosis, I had dreams, I had aspirations. I knew who I was. My identity was quite crystal. I was a very focused person. I'd started off being a teacher. I was a deputy principal of a private school, soon to be a headmaster. So I had a very clear pathway. What this drug, when I was given this diagnosis, that was all taken away from me. And I actually found that my concept of soul didn't exist anymore. I'd mentioned before, life had very little meaning for me. I had no purpose in life. And that to me was directly related to my concept of self. So I devised what I call a tree of awakening or positivity, where I took what all the clinicians were telling me. And the whole concept here was to rebuild myself. In this tree, the purple you can see is your heart. I saw that I had to rebuild my body, my mind, my heart, and my soul. And when I did that, I had rebuilt myself in such a way that I could now start leading a better life. So if I just look at different things, and let's see how we go. Is that all right? So on
Yes,
the
sir.
right-hand side, sorry, Lynette, was that any questions?
No, no, no. I love this tree of positivity, and if you will share. Oh, I have it now, so I can put it with the show notes so that people who are just listening can see what it looks like too.
Yeah, I think that's important because it's hard to imagine what I'm talking about. So if I
It's not
do,
that hard. I want people to imagine a beautiful tree that has 4 different sections. On the left, there's a purple and a pink, and then a yellow and a green section with leaves, and it brings together a whole person in 4 different branches, for lack of a better word.
yeah, all right. And what I might do is just talk about each part. So
It
I
sounds
sort
good.
of, and I like to be able to say that um, for those who have a diagnosis that they're living with dementia, is that your clinicians, your professional people you're seeing will be telling you this. And everything they're saying is on this tree, but I actually think it's much more than that. So if I do the bottom right, which is the green part, that's your body. So, everyone would have said to you, like, you have to watch what you eat. You have to eat healthy. No problems with that. And whether that be a composite of mine, Mediterranean diet, that's really important. And I sit entirely with that. It also means, for example, you limit processed foods. That's like your takeaways. So even though I used to work at McDonald's as a young kid, I love my McDonald's. I only eat McDonald's these days as a special treat. I'll talk about that later. So I've changed my whole diet. Right. Um, your clinicians would have spoken to you about keep active. You know, the idea is, you've got to keep active. That increases the blood supply to the brain. It does a whole range of things. Totally on page. I use the word just keep active because everyone just understands it. I'm going to share with you later what I do. And I've probably taken that keep active to a different level, but that's quite okay. You'll see things on there, reduce stress, and you can see that as a risk factor. Everyone's talking about that. To live a stressful life, I don't think is particularly good for you. Living a life which has very little stress, probably the way to go. Um, you see also on there, limit alcohol. I'm sort of seeing that all the time now. I have no problems. I love my wine. I used to. I don't, in a sense now, drink anywhere near what I used to. To me, a glass of wine or a beer is more like a treat, and I'll talk about that. There's a thing called regular fasting. Bredesen comes up with things like this, and I understand that, where you trying to get yourself into what we refer to as ketosis. You want to use up all the glucose in your brain, and for those who are not too sure, the glucose there is really related to your amyloid beta. Just like they're finding now, if you're eating a lot of glucose, then you're probably giving the fuel needed to create your amyloid betas in your brain. So I work off the principle is that I keep my carbohydrates quite low. I keep my sugars quite low for that reason. But you won't see, for example, winter rock pool swims. No one will ever tell you that. So my tree is created from years of doing experiments, worked out what works for me. And
Mhm.
I read about the Swedish, the Scandinavians, what they do. So no, I can't afford to actually go to those countries. So the easiest way I do is that when it comes to winter, we're in winter now. I'll put my wetsuit on. I'll go down to the local outdoor pool. It's a rock pool, we call it. It's in the ocean. And I swim. And it's freezing. I have no problems with that. But it's very interesting is that after doing a period of time, I actually come out really refreshed. And for me, it's like, sure, my head is mainly and my legs are in the water. The rest of my body is quite warm, but the impact it has on me, I said, wow, this is amazing. So that's on my trip. Massage therapy, I like the touch. It's all about brain stimulation. So what massage is doing, it's making you feel your senses. You're activating your brain. I'm really big on that. So you can imagine what I'm sort of saying is that when they talk about amyloid beta and they talk about tau, you've got roadblocks in your brain everywhere. nervous impulse has to find a new way of getting around to where it needs to go. So it takes longer. And to me, it's all about when you talk about neurogenesis and things like this, the more you activate your brain, you've got to build new neuronal pathways. And I'm very big about this. And this is where these type of things will come into it. And I'll talk about my challenges a little bit later. So if we jump now up to the yellow part, the yellow part is about your soul. And this is the things that it's getting close to you. Who are you? You know, what type of person are you? And that for me is, and you see there, community service. I remember when I was in that period of darkness, I was really concerned, people weren't doing things for me. I've now realized it's actually, I had it the wrong way around. What you have to do is do things for other people. So, one of those things is I'm a volunteer surf lifesaver. Prior to my diagnosis, I was a lifesaver the majority of my life. I surfed and swam the beaches where I come from, and I gave it up. So after being on the drug trial for about a year, I decided to go back. So my community service there is my lifesaving. I now train kids in an event called Champion Lifesaver. I'm going to show you a video of me later, what that means. So I actually coach kids too. So my life has sort of changed around a hell of a lot. When I keep active, I walk my dog every day at 5:30 in the morning. Rain, hail, or shine. It doesn't matter to me at all. That's what I do. I keep to a daily routine. And I do it because where I am, I've got a walkway, I've got nature, I've got beaches, I've got birds, I've got people to talk to. When people talk about that, and I'm very big about social interaction, social engagement, and what it's doing for you is that you're engaging your brain. You have to listen to what people say to you or listen to what you're hearing. You've got to interpret it, and then you've got to usually undertake an action. So for the hour and a half or 2 hours of me walking my dog, whether it be across the sand, through the nature, talking to people, I've got 2 hours of full on exercise, but also 2 hours of brain stimulation. So I'm very big that one of the things you need to do is not stay at home. It's actually not healthy for you. You need to get out, need to be able to communicate. And I've said, look, I've been doing this for 4 years. I have no doubt when I first started, I was shy. I wouldn't talk to people. But if you keep persevering, if you keep trying, then you get there. And you'll see just above community service, the thing called just keep swimming. And that's what that means. It means resilience. It means don't give up. So whatever you're doing, keep going with it. And what you have to understand is that with dementia and with Alzheimer's disease, it's going to take a while for you to realize it's actually working well for you. It's not like getting a cold, going to the doctor, get an antibiotic within 1 or 2 weeks, you're fine. That's not going to happen. You have to do this for a long period of time. With the understanding, the benefits are there. You just got to keep doing it. And you'll see therefore self-reflection. I think you have to learn to live with yourself. You've got to reflect about who you are now. Now, only reason I mentioned where I was at, what I was wanted to be, is that was a past life. In my self-reflection, I'm happy now that was a life that I experienced. It's past. I'm now living a different life, a completely different life. And in my own self-reflections, I'm very comfortable with that. I mentioned to you acts of kindness, community service. Again, there's so much pleasure in doing something for someone. It's quite extraordinary. And I would encourage everyone to pick that up. Acts of kindness can be as simple as giving way to a person on a footpath while you're walking your dog. It can be anything, doesn't it? The smallest thing makes a big difference. And when you start feeling good about yourself, that degree of positivity. My tree is about awakening your positivity. And I mean that is that you had a set person, you were a certain type of person before your diagnosis. The diagnosis didn't destroy that person. You are still the same person. So a lot of things that I talk about, and probably the closest word I could come up with was awakening it. It got buried under your diagnosis. What you have to do is just bring it back out again. And I think everyone understands that acts of kindness, it's something which is, it's human nature. It's a good thing to do. I'm going to talk a little bit later about setting challenges for yourself. I challenge myself all the time. I set myself goals. And it doesn't matter to me whether I achieve the goal or not. I might have to break the goal down small to make it a smaller, and I just build on the smaller goals till I finally get there. But in that journey, I'm going to stumble. And that's why I put over to the right. It's okay to stumble, meaning that if you make a mistake, it's quite okay. For example, I recently went to a footy game with Australia versus Wales. It was a rugby union game. And I try to limit my alcohol. I'm very clear on it. But all my mates were sitting down, having a beer, having a great time. I think, well, why shouldn't I? So to me, it's okay. Even though I will say I limit my alcohol, I'll go for weeks not without having anything. But when I'm out socializing, when I'm out having a good time, it's actually okay to stumble. You still have to be human. And I'm very strong about that. And another one is look for your silver lining. And that means that the journey with dementia is very much like a roller coaster. You have your good days and your bad days. And for me, I always try to look for the positive side of something which is negative. And so I always have a good outlook on life. Okay, let's move over to the pink side. That's your brain. So here you can see at the top bit, exercise your brain. Yeah, totally on the page with that. That's how you choose to do it. I do Sudokus, can't do crosswords. I have no idea how to do those. It's just, it could be chess, it could be anything. I would strongly recommend you to do that. You've got socialize with people. I've spoken about that. Set new goals. You're going to find out from me the goals that I've set. Probably a little bit over the top, but that's okay. But that wasn't always me. It's just where I'm at the moment. I'm very strong about a daily routine that you set yourself, so you know each day of the week what you're doing. And I have no problems in saying when I upset my daily routine is when I come unstuck and I get stressed. So I'm very careful that I do certain things on these days and I just block it out. It makes my life so much easier. I never used to listen to much music as a kid, as a growing up. Never had time, but it's probably one of the most enjoyable things I do at the moment. So I think music is amazing. Not only does it bring out the endorphins, but it exercises your brain. So I think it's very big. I'm going to talk about when I go swimming, I do now 2 kilometers at least. Not every day, but every second or third day I will swim 2 kilometers. And why I mentioned that magical number is that chocolate is actually off my diet. Love chocolate, but it has too much glucose in it for me. Very strong on that. However, I do have a block of Toblerone in my fridge, which is chocolate, which is broken up into triangles. I'm allowed, my goal and what I restrict myself, for example, is that I can have 1 block I break off if I swim 2 kilometers. If I don't swim 2 kilometers, then I get my block of chocolate or don't get my small piece of chocolate. So I reward myself all the time. So when I set my goals, there are little areas of encouragement always with me. It works well. Allows me to keep doing it. So I talk about challenge. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I might quickly show you now a thing called neurocognitive exercises.
Mhm.
And I'm going to show you the important role. This is a video. It'll go for about a couple of minutes. See how you go.
Bill approached me early on in his diagnosis, and he had a very obvious cognitive impairment. But he had enough ability to get his ideas across. And the main thing he was trying to tell me was that he had a plan to return to competitive swimming. So in order to help Bill achieve his goal of returning to swimming, we designed a neurocognitive training program, which focused on three key areas. This was on balance, coordination, and reflex action. I've been working with Bill for the past 18 months. Initially, it was for a shoulder injury, but has now transferred to assisting him in being able to compete in competitive life saving safely and effectively. Due to Bill's diagnosis of early-onset Alzheimer's disease, he has impairments including a decrease in balance, coordinating, mobility, and also a decrease in confidence when mobilizing, and in particular when running. This is placing him at a huge disadvantage when competing, as all events have a running component. Working with Bill, we have formulated a program to address all of these issues. So calf raises have been a big component of Bill's program, trying to help with build his confidence in his calf and his Achilles after his history of Achilles rupture. So here we have Bill doing some squats to help build up his quadriceps, hamstrings, and glute. So here we have some Jefferson curls. So these are really important in building up Bill's hamstring flexibility and also his hamstring strength, along with his glutes and lumbar spine. Towards the end stages of Bill's rehab program, we incorporate pogos, a plyometric exercise to help Bill with more dynamic movements.
So the reason I was showing you that is that we're going to talk about it later, but this is the part which I first started probably 3.5 years ago, doing these neurocognitive exercises. And it's only a very, very small thing to show you. It's much more complicated than that. But you're seeing me towards the end of it. And what I found, I needed to improve my reflex actions, you're going to see in a minute, my coordination and my balance. So the first three things I targeted.
I've started a new segment once a month. I'm inviting people into to an opportunity that if you are open to or looking for a free one-on-one coaching experience where you sign up and you come on and we coach through one specific problem that you have, I'd love to invite you to reach out to me. I'm calling them a flight audit, a dementia flight audit. And next month is the first month I actually want to invite somebody from the community to sign up and be willing to be coached through a particular problem. We'll come up with a goal for our time together, and we will come up with a solution for your specific problem. So if you are open to being on the podcast, if you want some free coaching so that you can see, so that we can get your own audit of your own situation, then please reach out to me via email at lizette@thinkdifferentdementia.com, and I will schedule you for a one-on-one, and we can audit your particular situation and you can get real-time help. So that's an open invitation for you to sign up. Email me at lizette@thinkdifferentdementia.com.
By doing these exercises, it's now allowed me to become much more active in life. And I will refer to that in about a couple more minutes' time. You'll see what I mean. And basically, it takes for me up to a year. I've got to start this to do a certain activity, but I will get there. All right, that's probably about all on that part of the tree. I come down, now I'm into the heart part. And this is the importance of role models. It's your family, it's your relatives, how it's, it's in your heart. These are people who are looking for, caring for you. It's about finding a passion, what's going to get you up in the morning. And I'm very, very keen about that. And I have a passion. Now, who would get up at 5:30 in the morning? Why am I doing it? Well, I have to understand that I want to beat this disease. To do that, I've got to have a passion. I've got to be able to push myself to limits. And again, I said to you, what I do, or what I'm going to show you now, isn't for everyone. The idea is not to mimic me. The idea is to look at yourself, look at your own experiences, your own abilities, and see what you can work out. Have you got a passion? Are you sort of just accepting this disease for what it is? Then I would say to you, change that mindset. You can enjoy a better life. So let's have a look at my attempts and see how we go. So from being on the trial, the first part of it for about 15 months, I decided to go back to being the surf lifesaver. And it was interesting. The knowledge part didn't actually present a problem for me. It was actually the physical part. And that involves a run and a swim. And I found that my ability to run was just really compromised. And that's why you'll see there's a focus on me starting to be able to run. But the real one, what got me was that in Australia, I think probably in America too, it would be the same. We talk about a run, swim, run. Mm-hmm. The swim is a 200-meter swim out through the waves. You've got to go around the buoy and you've got to come back and you've got to do all of it in 8 minutes. Now, as a lifesaver who's been a lifesaver since I was 21, that was easy. I did it with my eyes closed. Post-diagnosis, I had a huge problem. Basically, you can imagine doing freestyle. The simplicity of it is that you're moving your arms while you're kicking your legs and you've got to breathe. You've got to coordinate and you've got to synchronize everything. When you've got those roadblocks in your brain, you know what you want to do. You just can't do it as well. Then you've got the added dimension is that you've got to now swim through the waves, which are crashing on you, and you've got to come. When I was lucky, I told 2 guys who were swimming out with me that I had dementia. And it was interesting. I love this story is that one of them, he was repeating it that day because he'd failed it the week before. And his comment to me was, Bill, I'll swim with you. Knowing full well that he was putting at risk, he was going to fail again. I thought that was an amazing decision. So anyway, so they swam with me. And when you're swimming out there with dementia, your proprioception is exceptionally poor. You've got nothing to guide you. There are no lanes when you're swimming in a pool. You've got a black line. There are no markers. So you actually find that you actually don't know where you are. Mm-hmm. And I always worried that if I didn't learn how to swim again, and I passed this thing as a surf lifesaver, if I had to rescue a person, they'd be actually rescuing 2 people, not 1. So it was pretty important. So, and at the ending of the story was nice. I swam with them. They were my markers. We swam around the buoy and we made the beach and we did the run and I made it within 8 minutes. End result, I qualified to be a volunteer surf lifesaver. But it left me in this amazing quandary. It was that what I talked about. I passed, but I didn't pass. Meaning that if I had to rescue someone, I couldn't do it. So either I had to give it up, or what I did was I went back, I found an organization called Masters Swimming, Ring and Master Swimming, which I'm going to show you now. And I learned how to swim again, believe it or not. The lady to my left, see that old lady there?
Yes.
I can call her old. And for this reason, she's 96 years of age. She's a world champion.
That's amazing.
She's also my first swimming coach. It was just an amazing coincidence. I turn up to a organization called Ring and Masters, and there's my original swimming coach. So what did it do for me? Role models is on my tree for a particular reason. If she can swim, I could swim. So to me, it was really important. Okay. So I compete in master swimming. Do it at a branch, state, and international level now. So 3.5 years down the track, I always come last. That's fine. It's not the issue. The fact is that I'm able to do it is the most important thing. And I use it as a good way of just simply saying is that everything's achievable. I'll show you something else. So not only do I do Masters Swimming, I also do Masters Surf Lifesaving. So I have for you this kind of a video. I'm going to show you another quick video. Now, this is an event called, this is the Champion Lifesaver. It's an event which is for over 50s. I'm 64 years of age. I do come last in this. I have no problems at all in doing that. But in coming last, have a look at the expression on my face. I think it's priceless in the sense that I'm a person, the most important leaf to me in my tree is just keep swimming. And I use that all the time as a statement to everyone is that it's about you. It's about you doing the things best to your ability. You know, if you've got a competitive streak, it's okay to come last. It doesn't mean anything. What means most to me is that I'm able to do things that other people do too. I can dream. I can work towards achieving my goals. Another part of Master Surf Lifesaving is paddling a board. And I'll show you that. Okay, so this board, as you probably can see, is probably close to 10 foot. And that's called a racing mount. It's what you use to save a person. So I compete using that. And it's interesting is that it's actually good for me with a person with dementia, meaning that if you're swimming, you're by yourself, you've got no aid. All I have to do is learn how to paddle. I've got a board that keeps me afloat. So that one's pretty amazing. If that sort of makes sense. So much so, I didn't put the slide in today because I wasn't too sure how many, but I've competed locally, state, Australian, and international. In 2022, I traveled to Italy and I competed in the life-saving championships there. And something I'm really proud of. There were 20 in the race. I came 10th. So what happened there was that the fact it was still water. So it was just me paddling, and that was something achievable within myself. So that to me is an important thing. And lastly, because there's another shot there about a board. This is my wetsuit. I paddle my board on the lake, summer and winter. And that's also the same wetsuit that I go swimming in the winter rock pool. So it all sort of comes around. So you sort of see what I mean. And the expression on my face probably says a lot that for the very first time in my life, I'm actually smiling a lot. My body hurts. Trust me, it hurts. You know, it's painful. However, what am I gaining out of it? I believe that I'm learning how to live a better life. I think, and that's probably my takeaway by challenging myself, step out of your comfort zone and start doing things that, you probably thought about. As a youngster, I always thought about competing, never did actually. The first time I competed was with Alzheimer's disease. And people are really, once they know, they are really, really good to you. It's amazing. I used to think it wouldn't be like that, that people would be critical and things like that. But no, people are amazing. There's another shot I do. It's classic. You got to imagine it. Let's see if we can go well with imagining. I compete in another thing called pool rescue. That's in a pool. When you swim, I can't stand up on a block. I can, but someone's got to hold me. And I don't like doing that. So I just sort of stand on the edge, and when the gun goes off, I dive in. So in the Australian Championships, I'm doing this race and everyone's on the block, and the starter goes on your mark, get set, and I fall in. And from an Australian, or if it's an Australian competition, that means you are immediately disqualified, which is fine. So I just had to swim out of my lane, and the lady there who was the official looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, sir, I have to DQ you. You broke the start." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And I looked at her and I said, "Do you ever give a second chance to a person who's living with dementia?" And she looked at me. I think she's probably heard every possible excuse underneath the sun.
Probably.
And she looked at me and said, "Yes, I do." So she gave me another chance. I thought that was extraordinary in an Australian file. But no, but these are things that there are, I think, as we try to break down the stigma associated with Alzheimer's disease. It is a tough task. However, there are things that you can do. And people are so receptive, as long as you're upfront with them. All right. I have one last thing to share with you. And probably getting close to the end. My tree doesn't allow me to compete in master swimming, surf, life saving, in the sense that it gives me the focus. My tree sits on my wall. So I look at my tree every day. So in those days when I'm having it tough, then I'll look at my tree and yet I'm convinced myself I am doing the best I can to fight this disease. And I think that's one of the big factors associated with the tree. But I found that I also had to create what is called a reablement plan, meaning if I'm going to set these rather extraordinary goals for myself, I just can't just go and do it. So I created the steps towards creating a reablement plan. This is the plan that I use to achieve the goals that I've set. The goal I have at the moment is that there's a walk that's called Walking the Talk with Dementia. It's a 40-kilometer walk in Spain at the end of August. And I put my hand up to do that. So I'm going to go over to Spain on the 22nd of August, and I'm going to walk with 80 people in a way of, it's a world recognized thing. It's quite an amazing thing, to raise awareness about dementia and how to reduce the stigma that people living with dementia are still capable of living a better life. The goal I set myself is I'm going to run it. So to do that, it's not going to, I just don't think of things in the morning and say, "Oh, I'm going to do this." I've set myself a 12-week program to do this, is to run again, to be able to run this. So that involves, the first step is a person-centered assessment, where I get an occupational therapist or someone to actually do an assessment of me and say, "Okay, is this goal achievable?"
Mm-hmm.
Set a SMART goal, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So I look at my goal and see whether I've set myself. I build my plan. So Dan, for example, is my physio, has created a plan for me. And that involves the first 3 to 4 weeks was just actually trying to start building up my muscles. And then after the 5th week, we then start running. And at the moment, I run for, I run 1.2 kilometers, stop 1 minute, run another 1.2 kilometers, stop, rest for a minute, and then run 600 meters. So eventually that gets to me just under 3 kilometers. I've got to get to 10. And I'll do that hopefully over the next 6 weeks, is that I'll slowly build myself up and my fitness and my strength to actually achieve that. So everything's programmed for me. So when I do these type of things, you've got to look at your risk factors. You've got to make sure you've got a plan, make sure it's achievable. You've got to work with what we've referred to as allied health professionals to help you along that track. Okay. Question time. How's that?
Oh, I have 100,000 questions, but what I find the most fascinating is that what you've described, your tree, your your awakening, your positivity, everybody benefits from it. You don't need to have dementia it's a healthy way of living, period. It just reminds me so much of how holistic, how we are created and how we're supposed to be. And it's just a very normal, healthy way that people for centuries and decades have lived, but we've walked away from it to a large extent in the modern world, right? Um, so I absolutely salute you for what you've done. I think it is so inspiring. Um, my biggest thing is really working as much in my space as I can to change the stigma of cognitive loss for as many people as we can, because there's no shame in having this condition, and there but for the grace of God, could go anybody. It doesn't really, it can happen to anyone. And so I find there's so many components to your story that just is so fascinating and inspiring. I did not know that you're one of an identical twin. There's a lot of research studies that have been done on identical twins where one has dementia and the other doesn't. And so it's just, I'm just so grateful to have heard your story, because it gives me, I primarily work with the caregivers, but I do support a couple of people that are living with dementia themselves. And then I support my parents who both have cognitive impairment. And I wish that my dad would be willing to do something like this, but he's not, and I know how much effort goes into just healthy living when there's nothing wrong with you, right? So I just thank you so much. It's like I'm going to come up with all of the questions tomorrow. And for anybody who knows me, knows it's really hard to have me pretty speechless.
Oh, thank you for that. But just picking up a couple of points, what you were saying is, yeah, I sort of see it too. I think I came to the decision that I couldn't accept that there's no way you can't fight this disease. I understood why it's incurable, why it's progressive. And to me, I'd met enough people to convince me that some people seem to be able to slow it down.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of the tree is there's no cure with this. I'm like 100% on the page that in my case, I'm lucky because the drug has given me a chance and the tree is just adding to it. And and how I see it is that it's a way of enjoying your life for a longer period of time. And I think that's the most important thing. Until a cure comes along, you can actually do something to show yourself and show your family and your friends, your relatives, that you are fighting this disease to the best of your ability. And I think that's the most important thing. And when I reflect back in straight after my diagnosis, I had accepted defeat already. And I think that's the wrong concept. And I went through it and it lasted for a period of time. And now I've sort of realized that the best thing to do, and it's why I do the advocate for this, is to say to people is that, yeah, you can do things. The little things that you can do can make a difference.
It can make a tremendous difference. Bill, have you met a lot of other people living with dementia in your advocacy work?
I have, I now I recently just came back from Poland. I get asked to actually talk at international conferences about my journey now. That's what I share. I've been to London, I've been to Taipei, I'm going to Italy, and I do all the all the ones in Australia. And I'm either talking about my tree, or I talk about my journey, or I talk about, like, say last year, I didn't put on this slide. My goal last year was to do my first ocean water swim. So I trained for 9 months to do that. So I made a film out of it, and just to show people how I went about it, what part of my tree was, how it worked, created a reablement plan. Dan wrote things for me and put it all in operation. And it was about the social aspects to it and all that type of thing. So that was important. So I try to, like, wherever I can, set goals for myself. Also last year, I actually came over to San Francisco. My son is living there, and we went to the Yosemite. Is it correct to say Yosemite Mountains?
I don't live in California.
So we went hiking.
You went hiking in Yosemite, right?
Yeah, yeah, I didn't pronounce it correctly. Yeah, but I went
Oh, that's
hiking.
okay. I just took a fat chance.
Yeah, and for me, it was great. Stepping out of my comfort zone, set yourself goals. It was great. A great experience to do with my son and his partner, and Nick, my wife, came too. So the four of us, it was a fantastic experience. What's the big difference between either sitting home and say, no, I can't do it, or I'll give it a shot, see how I go. And it didn't matter that couldn't keep up with everyone. That was fine. The fact that I did it was the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's those are the competition part. You got to be part of. It's actually okay to finish it. It's the most important thing, and
Absolutely,
to achieve your goal. And that's the part that I like. I like the fact that it doesn't just apply, as you said, it doesn't just apply to people with living with dementia.
Mm-mm.
There are many aspects of life, especially with risk factors now. There's a big part for it to play.
The question was, have you met lots of people with dementia?
I have, sorry. And so I also lose track of questions too.
That's okay.
James was just reminding, I've met lots of people with dementia. And when I do meet them, we share our stories, and there's always a part of me to show them how to go one step further.
Mm-hmm.
What other people know, they're actually quite on the page. They just haven't formalised exactly what I've done. But yeah, it's always an interesting discussion. And I think what gives me the greatest pleasure is to be able to help people who are living with dementia and show them there's a better way to do things. And that's what I enjoy. So answers yes to that.
And the reason I asked the question is because in my experience, a lot of people living with dementia I've never met anybody who has really on their own gone to put in the work to develop out a system and a process and a plan for themselves to maintain and improve both their physical body and their thinking processes. And so I guess I'm trying to figure out, do you feel like most people just give up because of the stigma that everybody says there's nothing that can be done, so they just don't do anything? Or do you feel like what some people experience, they get into that dark space like you did at the beginning, but they're not able to come out of it again?
The dark space is really common. And that's probably why I talk about my experience in Japan, to say that experience allowed me to walk away from that darkness. Whereas a lot of people would spend much longer, sadly to say, they become quite depressed. And it's difficult. So that's always an important part of what I say in terms of that darkness. Yes, I've experienced, I know exactly what you're talking about, but you have to be able to let go. And that's one of my leads, is to let go of that and move on with your life. Accept that there's no cure for this disease, except it's progressive. But what you need to understand is that you still have a life to live.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to get that part across, I think, is important. A lot of people are proactive. You do meet them, but they haven't formalized it like me. I suppose I'm lucky that being a pharmacist, I wasn't really just a teacher. I was an administrator. I'm a teacher of physics and chemistry. So my brain is wired differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mentioned. My brain didn't work this way. I had a photo as a person, I had a photographic memory. So I could do things which was quite extraordinary. However, so that's the way my brain worked. So creating a tree like this was just part and parcel of a past life. It's nothing, I don't actually consider it anything special. It's just something that I used to do. It's a remnant of my life previously. So I'm actually lucky. I'm blessed to be able to have had that experience. If I hadn't, I couldn't have created this. The arrangement plan was simple. That was just logic. To say, okay, you can't just go from there to there. You need steps. What are the steps I need to do? So I take your compliment. But I think again, where I say I created it, there's part of it is that I'm working with my twin brother a hell of a lot. We have a very close relationship. So, there's a lot of guidance there. He found the trial for me to go on. There was a lot of discussions there. I suppose that's probably, I sort of looked at it and I talk about me all the time. It should be a team. There's a team there who's working with me. I might have the idea, but there's a team approach.
That's wonderful.
We need to look towards that. I'm sure I'll do that.
So if people wanted to connect with you, how do they connect with you?
Probably the easiest way, you can go onto my website, which is shown there, Awakening of Positivity. You can read more about this. You can make contact with me. And I'm happy to answer questions. James here monitors it all the time for them. You can follow me. Probably the best way would be to follow me on LinkedIn. Just like we mentioned before, is that you heard about me on LinkedIn. You can follow what I'm doing all the time on there. You can keep up to date. I do have to spend a lot more time on my website. It hasn't updated for about a year or so. So there's work to be done on that, but at least you can see what I'm doing.
And if you could tell families or the family support people, family caregivers, right? It's not a great word because you're just, a family member, but what would you tell them that you wish that they would know about living with dementia that could maybe make their lives easier?
I think a lot of people with dementia just hear that same story. You get a diagnosis, well, just go home, get your affairs in order, and come back in 6 months' time, and I'll just see how you're going. And that has huge, I believe it happened to me too, and it has huge ramifications on how you deal with this. So the message from my perspective is, yes, do I accept that the diagnosis has been tragic, has been devastating? Totally on the page with it. Absolutely totally. But the important thing is that you have to move ahead with your life. Your family needs to move ahead with their lives. You are surrounded with people who love you, who care for you. But there's a thing that you can do. Not to sort of sit there in your own self-pity and feel sorry for you. I did it. Did it get me anywhere? No. made me a burden for everyone. So what I would strongly advise or ask you to think about, that in your diagnosis, there will be a period of time where that will be true. The important thing is to come to understanding, accept your diagnosis, realize that your life as you knew it, yes, it has gone. What you have to do is to rebuild a new life. Take the parts of your previous life that you want to keep. You might go like self-life saving and things like that. Think about what gives you passion, what gets you up in the morning, and start developing a new life. Rebuild yourself. That, my idea or my belief in destroys your whole self-concept. I think that's fairly true. What you've got to do is that understand the person who you were is still there. That person still exists. Just the diagnosis has changed the perception. And what you've got to do is just reestablish yourself, creating a new life that you're proud of, and your family acknowledges that you're trying to do the best of your ability to fight this disease. And I think that's an important thing. And you know that when you're getting there is when you're starting to smile and you're starting to laugh again, from my perspective. And you saw that on a lot of the pictures that I was showing you, that I'm smiling. I might have just paddled 2 or 3 kilometers in my arms and they just feel like they're going to fall off. But I'm smiling. But that's okay. There's an enjoyment factor there. And the fact that I do it all the time, there's a passion there too. And I do it because I want to do it. I'm making that decision. No one's forcing me to do this. And I think there's a strong belief that, yes, there is a stigma attached to it. Yes, the community needs to be made aware of. Not of the fact that it's devastating and tragic. I think a lot of people understand that. It's more so that you still have a life that you can contribute, that society needs to be able to work with you, give you opportunities so you can enjoy a life post-diagnosis. I think that's probably my takeaway messages for everyone.
Thank you so very, very much, Bill. I really appreciate your time today. I am so glad we were able to coordinate the time zones, because Australia is always hard for me to coordinate, because I'm not a night person and I'm not an early morning person. And people, that's hard. It's hard. The 14 hours is a hard time zone.
Yes.
But I really, really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your support person being here helping you today. I know he's not on center stage, but he's been our tech help. So thank you very much to him as well.
Can we move it over to him so he gets...
Oh, I'm very sure he doesn't want that. He's hiding. There you go. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. That's all right.
Awesome.